My name is Serafina Blackwood, and I'm 28 years old. Standing in that suffocating graduation ceremony tent, watching my father beam with pride at my brother while completely ignoring my existence, I never imagined that in less than 30 minutes, everything I believed about my family would shatter into a million pieces. The drill sergeant's face went ghost white when he saw me, his hands trembling as he whispered words that would destroy my father's world forever. But before I tell you how sweet justice tastes, let me take you back to where this nightmare began. Hey everyone. I can already feel the tension building just thinking about this story. Before we dive into this family drama that'll have you questioning everything you think you know about loyalty and blood, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. And if you're ready for a story that proves karma doesn't just knock, it kicks down the door, smash that like button and hit subscribe because this revenge tale is about to get wild. 3 months before my brother Marcus' military graduation, I was living in what I thought was a normal, dysfunctional family. Dad always favored Marcus, the golden child, the football star, the one who could do no wrong. Meanwhile, I was the disappointment daughter who chose art over athletics, creativity over conformity. Mom had passed away when I was 15, and since then, Dad barely acknowledged my existence unless it was to criticize my life choices. I worked as a freelance graphic designer, scraping by in a tiny apartment across town, while Marcus got a full ride to college and then fast-tracked through military training. Dad paid for everything: Marcus' car, his apartment, his books. When I asked for help with Mom's medical bills that were somehow still in my name, Dad told me to figure it out like an adult. The discovery that changed everything happened on a rainy Tuesday evening. I'd gone to Dad's house to drop off some of Mom's jewelry that I'd found in my old bedroom. Dad wasn't home, but I still had my key. As I was placing the jewelry box on his dresser, I accidentally knocked over a stack of papers. Among the scattered documents, one caught my eye: a letter from the Department of Veterans Affairs addressed to Elena Blackwood Estate. My mother's name. My hands shook as I read the contents. It was notification of a substantial life insurance payout and military widow benefits that had been deposited into an account under my father's name as primary beneficiary and legal guardian of minor dependents. The date on the letter was from 13 years ago. I was 15 when Mom died, but Marcus was already 18, legally an adult. Yet according to these documents, Dad had claimed guardianship over both of us to access benefits meant for my education and support. I photographed everything with trembling fingers, my heart pounding as I realized what I was seeing. There were bank statements showing regular deposits from the VA, totaling over $200,000 over the years. Money that was meant for me, for my education, for my future. Money that Dad had been collecting while telling me he couldn't afford to help with anything. But it got worse, much worse. Hidden beneath the VA letters was a manila folder labeled Medical Records, Confidential. Inside were documents I'd never seen before. My mother's complete medical file, including military service records I never knew existed. My mother, Elena Vasquez Blackwood, hadn't just been a nurse like Dad always told us. She was a decorated Army combat medic who served 2 tours in Afghanistan. The medical records revealed something that made my blood run cold. Mom's cancer treatments, the ones Dad always said were experimental and not covered by insurance, had actually been fully covered by her veterans' benefits. Every single treatment, every medication, every procedure. The bills that had been transferred to my name after her death were fabricated. I sat on Dad's bedroom floor, surrounded by evidence of a betrayal so deep it felt like drowning. Not only had he stolen my inheritance and education fund, but had been making me pay fake medical bills for my own mother's treatment. Treatment that was already paid for by benefits she'd earned serving her country. The final nail in the coffin was a series of email printouts between Dad and Marcus from the past few years. Marcus knew, had known about the VA benefits, about Mom's military service, about everything. In one email, Marcus actually thanked Dad for keeping Sarah in the dark about the money situation because it meant more for my future. They'd both been lying to me for over a decade, stealing money that was rightfully mine while watching me struggle to pay bills that didn't even exist. While I worked multiple jobs and ate ramen noodles for dinner, they were living off money my mother's sacrifice had provided. I took pictures of everything. Every document. Every bank statement. Every email. My hands were steady now, filled with a cold fury that surprised me. I carefully put everything back exactly as Id found it and left the house. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I researched my mother's military service online. What I found broke my heart and ignited a fire in my chest that would burn for months. Elena Vasquez had received a Purple Heart for injuries sustained while saving 3 wounded soldiers under fire. She had been featured in military publications as a hero. Her unit had dedicated their deployment to her memory. My mother wasn't just a veteran. She was a decorated war hero whose sacrifice had provided for her children's future. A future that Dad had stolen and Marcus had helped him hide. As I sat in my cramped apartment, surrounded by photos of evidence, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to confront them directly. I wasn't going to have a family meeting or give them a chance to gaslight me with more lies. I was going to wait for the perfect moment. A moment when their pride and arrogance would be on full display. And then I was going to destroy them with the truth. Marcus' military graduation was in 3 months. Dad had been bragging to everyone about his military family legacy, conveniently forgetting that the only real military hero in our family was the woman whose benefits had been stealing. Had invited half the town, planning a huge celebration for his golden boy. That graduation ceremony would be the perfect stage for the truth to finally come out. The weeks following my discovery were a masterclass in emotional compartmentalization. I had to pretend everything was normal while internally planning for the moment I'd expose their betrayal. The hardest part wasn't hiding my rage. It was hiding my newfound knowledge of who my mother really was. Every family interaction became a performance. When Dad made his usual dismissive comments about my lack of direction compared to Marcus' military success, I bit my tongue and smiled. When Marcus called to brag about his upcoming graduation and how proud he was to continue the family tradition of service, I congratulated him while my stomach churned with disgust. But I wasn't just sitting idle. I was gathering intelligence like the daughter of a combat veteran should. My first stop was the Veterans Affairs office downtown. I'd made an appointment under the pretense of researching my mother's service for a family memorial project. The coordinator, Mrs. Patricia Hughes, was a kind woman in her 60s who lit up when I mentioned my mother's name. "Elena Vasquez Blackwood," she said, pulling up files on her computer. "Oh honey, your mother was extraordinary. I processed her benefits personally. Such a tragedy that she passed so young, but at least her sacrifice provided for her children's education and future." I maintained my composure as she walked me through the benefits my mother had earned. Education funds, survivor benefits, medical coverage, everything that should have been mine. When I mentioned that I'd never received any educational assistance, Mrs. Hughes frowned and pulled up more detailed records. "That's strange," she murmured, clicking through screens. "According to our records, all benefits have been consistently distributed to the designated account. Your father has been the primary contact as guardian, even though," she paused, checking dates, "even though you would have aged out of guardianship years ago." I asked if there was any way to request a full audit of the benefit distributions. Hugh's expression grew serious as she realized what I might be implying. "Honey," she said carefully, "if you suspect there's been any misappropriation of veteran benefits, that's a federal crime. We take that very seriously." I told her I just wanted to understand my mother's legacy better, but I could see the wheels turning in her mind. She gave me her direct number and told me to call if I ever had concerns about how my mother's benefits were being handled. My next stop was more personal. I reached out to my mother's old unit through social media. It took some searching, but I found Sergeant Major Jennifer Walsh, who had served with my mother in Afghanistan. When I introduced myself as Elena's daughter, the response was immediate and emotional. "Serafina, your mother talked about you constantly. She was so proud of her artistic daughter. We've been trying to reach your family for years about memorial events and reunions. That hit me like a punch to the gut, trying to reach us. We've sent invitations to your father's address multiple times, but never heard back. We assumed you all preferred privacy to grieve." Dad had been intercepting communications from my mother's military family. Had cut us off from an entire community that wanted to honor her memory and support her children. Jennifer told me stories about my mother that brought tears to my eyes. How she'd carry pictures of Marcus and me in her helmet, how she'd sketch in a journal during downtime, saying she wanted to encourage my artistic talents when she got home. How she'd talk about using her GI Bill benefits to make sure both her children could pursue their dreams. Your mother was planning to go to art school herself when she got back, Jennifer said. She wanted to support your artistic career and maybe even collaborate with you someday. The conversation lasted 2 hours, and by the end, Jennifer had invited me to the annual memorial service for fallen soldiers from their unit. It was scheduled for 2 weeks after Marcus' graduation. "We'd love to finally meet Elena's children," she said. "The whole unit has always wondered about you both." I accepted the invitation, already formulating how this would fit into my plans. My research phase also included documenting everything meticulously. I created encrypted backup files of all the evidence and started a detailed timeline of Dad's deception. I even consulted with a lawyer, not to pursue immediate legal action, but to understand my options and the legal implications of what had been done to me. The lawyer, Sarah Martinez, specialized in military family law and veteran benefits. When I showed her the documentation, her face went hard. "This is criminal fraud," she said bluntly. "Your father has been illegally collecting benefits meant for you, and the fake medical bills constitute additional fraud. You could pursue both civil and criminal charges." But I wasn't ready for lawyers yet. I wanted something more immediate, more personal. I wanted to expose them in front of everyone who mattered to them, the way they'd humiliated me for years with their lies and dismissiveness. As Marcus' graduation approached, Dad's bragging reached new heights. He'd told everyone about the big celebration he was planning, how proud he was of his military family's continued service. He'd even had special invitations printed with the family crest and a mention of our proud military heritage. The irony was suffocating, but it also gave me the perfect opening. I decided to attend the graduation, not as the disappointment daughter they expected, but as something they'd never anticipated. I reached out to Sergeant Major Walsh and asked if she'd like to attend Marcus' graduation as a representative of my mother's unit. She was thrilled at the opportunity to finally meet our family and pay respects to her fallen comrade's son. I also contacted Mrs. Hughes from the VA office. I mentioned that my family was celebrating our military legacy at my brother's graduation and wondered if there might be any way to honor my mother's service at the same event. She suggested that a local VA representative could present a commemorative flag or medal to the family. Everything was falling into place. Dad and Marcus would have their big celebration, surrounded by everyone they wanted to impress. And then, in front of all those witnesses, the truth about my mother's real legacy, and their theft of it, would finally come out. I bought a new dress for the graduation. Something dignified, something that would photograph well when this story inevitably made the local news, because I had a feeling that Marcus' graduation day was going to be memorable for all the wrong reasons. The 2 weeks leading up to Marcus' graduation were a delicate dance of manipulation and preparation. I had to maintain my role as the overlooked daughter, while secretly orchestrating the most spectacular public revelation our small town had ever seen. My first major move was reaching out to Marcus' commanding officer, Colonel Rebecca Torres. I called the base under the pretense of wanting to surprise my family with additional military honors for the graduation ceremony. When I mentioned my mother's service and sacrifice, Colonel Torres was immediately interested. "I wasn't aware that Private Blackwood came from a Gold Star family," she said, referring to families who had lost a service member. "We take special pride in honoring the legacy of fallen heroes, especially when their children follow in their footsteps." I carefully explained that my mother's service had been private family matter, but that I wanted to honor her memory at Marcus' graduation. Colonel Torres was touched by what she perceived as a surprise tribute planned by a loving sister. "I'd be honored to present a special commendation acknowledging your family's sacrifice and your mother's heroic service," she offered. "We could even have Sergeant Major Patricia Wells, who served in your mother's unit, present the colors." My heart nearly stopped. Sergeant Major Wells. That had to be Patricia Walsh, Jennifer's commanding officer. The universe was aligning perfectly for my revenge. That would be incredible, I managed, keeping my voice steady. My father and brother would be so surprised and honored. Colonel Torres promised to coordinate with the base honor guard and make it a truly memorable ceremony. She had no idea just how memorable it would be. Next, I contacted the local newspaper, the Millbrook Gazette. I'd gone to high school with the current editor, Jamie Chen, who'd always been hungry for real stories beyond city council meetings and high school sports. I pitched her a human interest story about honoring fallen veterans through their children's achievements. It's about how military families carry on legacies of service, I told Jamie over coffee. My brother is graduating from basic training, and we're planning to honor my mother's sacrifice during the ceremony. She was a Purple Heart recipient who died of cancer related to her military service. Jamie was immediately hooked. Military family stories always performed well, especially with Memorial Day approaching. She arranged to have a photographer at the graduation and planned to interview our family afterward for a weekend feature story. This could be really beautiful, Jamie said. A story about how a war hero's sacrifice lives on through her children. Very touching. If she only knew how touching it was about to become. My most crucial ally, however, was someone I hadn't expected. Marcus' girlfriend, Ashley Morrison. Ashley was sweet, genuine, and completely in love with Marcus. She'd been dating him for 2 years and had been looking forward to meeting his mysterious artist sister at the graduation. Ashley reached out to me 3 days before the ceremony, wanting to coordinate a surprise celebration for Marcus. During our coffee meeting, she mentioned something that made my blood boil all over again. Marcus feels terrible that your family couldn't afford to send you to college, she said sympathetically. Has been saving money to help you get your degree once he's settled in his military career. He said your father has always struggled financially since your mother's medical bills. The lies had even infected this innocent girl who genuinely cared about educational opportunities for others. Marcus had been playing the noble brother, planning to help me with money that was already mine to begin with. I made a decision that would prove crucial to my plan's success. I told Ashley a carefully edited version of the truth. Ashley, there's something about my family that Marcus doesn't know. Something I discovered recently about my mother's military service. I'm planning to share it at the graduation as a surprise, but I want you to be prepared because it might be emotional. I showed her some of the documentation about my mother's heroic service, framing it as a family secret that my father had kept to protect us from the pain of her loss. Ashley was moved to tears reading about my mother's Purple Heart and the lives she'd saved. This is incredible, Ashley whispered. Marcus will be so proud to know Hez following in the footsteps of a real war hero. Why has your father kept this hidden? Hez always said it was too painful to talk about, I replied, which was technically true. But I think it's time Marcus knew the truth about the legacy Hez inheriting. Ashley became an unwitting accomplice, promising to help ensure Marcus was in the right emotional state to receive this wonderful surprise about his mother's heroism. The final piece of my preparation involved the most painful task of all, creating a memorial presentation about my mother's real service. I spent hours researching her unit, her missions, the lives she'd saved. I compiled photographs, military citations, and testimonials from her fellow soldiers into a beautiful tribute presentation. The research revealed even more heartbreaking details. My mother had been recommended for higher honors beyond her Purple Heart, but had died before the paperwork was processed. She'd donated part of her combat pay to a fund for children of fallen soldiers. She'd written letters to Marcus and me that were never delivered, letters expressing her hopes for our futures and her pride in our different talents. These letters, held by her unit's chaplain, were supposed to be given to us after her death. Dad had never told us they existed. Reading my mother's words, written from a combat zone, about her dreams for my artistic career and her pride in my creativity, broke something fundamental inside me. She'd known exactly who I was and had loved me completely, even while Dad spent years making me feel worthless for being different from Marcus. My beautiful Serafina has her grandmother's artistic soul. She'd written, I can't wait to see what masterpieces she creates. I want her to know that sensitivity and creativity are not weaknesses, they're superpowers that will help her heal a broken world. Those words became my war cry. The night before the graduation, I received a call that would make my revenge even sweeter. Sergeant Major Walsh called to inform me that she'd contacted several members of my mother's old unit who wanted to attend the ceremony. Word spread through our veteran network, she explained. Elena was beloved by so many people. We have 8 veterans driving in for tomorrow's ceremony, some from 3 states away. They want to finally meet her children and pay their respects. 8 veterans. 8 witnesses who knew my mother's real story and had no idea about the lies Dad and Marcus had been living. 8 people who would instantly recognize the fraud when they heard Dad's version of events. They're bringing a special memorial flag that was flown over our base in Afghanistan in Elena's honor, Walsh continued. It's been waiting for the right moment to be presented to her family. I thanked her while privately marveling at how perfectly everything was aligning. Tomorrow wouldn't just be Marcus' graduation. It would be a memorial service for a hero whose own family had dishonored her memory through lies and theft. As I laid out my dress for the next day, I felt a calmness I hadn't experienced in months. Tomorrow, my mother would finally get the recognition she deserved. Tomorrow, the truth would set me free. And tomorrow, Dad and Marcus would learn that some lies are too big to survive the light of day. What happens when 8 combat veterans meet the family that's been living off their fallen comrades' stolen benefits? You're about to find out, and trust me, it gets intense. But first, I need you to do something for me. Hit that like button if you're feeling that justice energy building, and let me know in the comments. Have you ever had to expose a family lie that changed everything? Because what happened next left an entire graduation ceremony speechless. The morning of Marcus' graduation dawned crisp and clear, the kind of perfect day that makes everything feel like destiny. I arrived at the ceremony early, wearing my navy blue dress and my mother's silver necklace, the only piece of her jewelry Dad hadn't managed to hide or sell. The graduation was being held at the base's main parade ground, with families seated in bleachers facing a stage decorated with American flags and military banners. Dad had reserved an entire row for our guests, though he had no idea who would actually be filling those seats. I watched him strutting around in his best suit, playing the proud military father for anyone who would listen. He kept talking about our family's tradition of service and how Marcus was continuing the legacy. Every word felt like acid in my ears, but I smiled and nodded like the dutiful daughter he expected. Marcus looked sharp in his dress uniform, and I felt a pang of genuine pride mixed with my anger. Despite everything, he was my brother, and Head worked hard for this achievement. But that didn't excuse what Head done to me. Ashley found me in the crowd, bubbling with excitement about the surprise I had planned for Marcus. She had no idea she was about to witness the complete destruction of her boyfriend's family mythology. The first surprise guest to arrive was Colonel Torres, followed by an honor guard carrying special presentation flags. Dad's chest puffed up with pride, assuming this was standard ceremony protocol. He started bragging to nearby families about the special recognition his son was receiving. Then Sergeant Major Walsh arrived with 7 other veterans, all wearing their dress uniforms and carrying a memorial flag case. When they approached our seating area, Dad's expression shifted to confusion. "Excuse me," Dad said. "I think you might have the wrong family. Are you Robert Blackwood, Elena Vasquez Blackwood's husband?" Walsh asked formally. Yes, but Elena was just a nurse. I don't understand." Walsh's expression hardened slightly. "Sir, your wife was Sergeant Elena Vasquez, Purple Heart recipient and decorated combat medic. We're here to honor her sacrifice and meet her children." Dad's face went white, but before he could respond, the ceremony began. Marcus and his fellow graduates marched onto the field as the band played military anthems. For a moment, I almost felt bad about what I was about to do. Almost. The standard graduation proceedings went smoothly until Colonel Torres took the podium for special recognitions. This wasn't part of the normal program, but Shed arranged it specifically for what she thought was a beautiful family tribute. "Today we have the honor of recognizing a family whose sacrifice for our nation spans generations," Colonel Torres announced. "Private Marcus Blackwood comes from a Gold Star family, following in the footsteps of his heroic mother, Sergeant Elena Vasquez, who gave her life in service to our country." A murmur went through the crowd. Dad was frantically whispering to the veterans sitting near us, trying to explain that there had been some misunderstanding. But Walsh and her fellow soldiers weren't confused at all. They were finally getting to honor their fallen comrade. Sergeant Vasquez received the Purple Heart for injuries sustained while rescuing 3 wounded soldiers under enemy fire. Colonel Torres continued, reading from the official citation. Her courage and dedication saved lives and exemplified the highest ideals of military service. Marcus, standing at attention with his unit, looked genuinely shocked. Head never heard any of this before. His eyes found mine in the crowd. confusion and something that might have been realization dawning on his face. At this time, I'd like to invite the Blackwood family to the stage, to receive a memorial flag flown in Sergeant Vasquez's honor, and to hear from her fellow soldiers who served with her in Afghanistan. This was the moment. Dad tried to decline, mumbling about privacy and family grief. But 8 uniformed veterans were already standing, and the entire ceremony was watching. There was no escape. We walked to the stage like condemned prisoners. Dad kept whispering frantically about how this was all a mistake. But I just smiled serenely. Marcus looked between Dad and me, finally starting to piece together that something was very wrong. Sergeant Major Walsh took the podium, her voice carrying clearly across the silent ceremony ground. Elena Vasquez was my friend, my sister in arms, and one of the bravest soldiers I've ever known. She died far too young, but not before ensuring that her children would be taken care of through her military benefits and life insurance. Dad actually stumbled backward at this point. The crowd was riveted, sensing drama but not understanding it yet. Elena often talked about her children. She was especially proud of her daughter Serafina's artistic talents and wanted to use her GI Bill benefits to support both children's education. That's when Jamie Chen, the newspaper editor, stood up in the press section with her photographer. She'd been expecting a feel-good story, but her journalist instincts were now screaming that something much bigger was happening. However, Walsh said, her voice taking on a harder edge, "We've recently learned that Elena's benefits may not have reached her children as intended. We've discovered that substantial funds meant for these children's education and support have been misdirected." The silence was deafening. Dad looked like he might vomit. Marcus was staring at me with growing horror as he realized what was happening. "Sir," Walsh addressed Dad directly, "according to Veterans Affairs records, you've been collecting survivor benefits for your daughter well past her majority, benefits that should have gone directly to her for education and support. Is this correct?" Every eye in that ceremony was now focused on our family drama playing out on the main stage. Dad opened and closed his mouth like a fish, unable to form words. That's when I stepped forward to the microphone. "My name is Serafina Blackwood," I said, my voice steady and clear. "3 months ago, I discovered that my father has been stealing Veterans Affairs benefits meant for my education for over a decade. Money my mother earned by bleeding for this country. Money that was supposed to help me honor her legacy." The crowd erupted. Phones came out to record what was happening. Dad grabbed my arm, hissing stop under his breath, but I shook him off. "I also discovered that my mother wrote letters to Marcus and me before she died, letters that were never delivered. Letters where she expressed her pride in both of us and her hopes for our futures. Letters my father kept hidden because they contradicted the lies he's been telling for years." Marcus stepped forward, his face pale. "Sarah, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that the medical bills I've been paying for years, Mom's uncovered cancer treatment, those were fake, Marcus. Her treatment was fully covered by veteran benefits. Dad has been making me pay fictional debt while he and you lived off money that was rightfully mine." The gasps from the crowd were audible. Ashley was crying, her hand over her mouth. The veterans on stage looked murderous. "And you knew, didn't you, Marcus?" I pulled out my phone, showing the screenshots of his emails with Dad. "You knew about the benefits. You thanked Dad for keeping me in the dark so there would be more money for your future." Marcus read the email evidence, his face crumbling as he realized his lies were now public record, broadcast to his new military family and commanding officers. Colonel Torres took the microphone back, her voice arctic with fury. "Veterans Affairs fraud is a federal crime, Mr. Blackwood. Theft of benefits meant for Gold Star families is among the most serious offenses we prosecute." Dad finally found his voice, but only to make things worse. "She's lying. She's always been jealous of Marcus, always trying to cause trouble in this family." That's when Sergeant Major Walsh delivered the killing blow. "Sir, we have copies of every benefit payment, every falsified document, and every fraudulent claim you've filed. The FBI Veterans Affairs Investigation Unit has been notified and is already reviewing your case." The ceremony ground erupted in chaos. Military police were suddenly flanking our family. Media crews were pushing forward for statements. Marcus was staring at me with a mixture of shock, betrayal, and dawning understanding of what his complicity had cost him. And standing there in the center of it all, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The satisfaction of truth finally being heard. The immediate aftermath of my revelation was like watching a controlled demolition in slow motion. Everything Dad and Marcus had built their identities around crumbled within minutes, and the ripple effects spread through the crowd like wildfire. Military police approached Dad with practiced efficiency, while Colonel Torres attempted to restore order to what was supposed to be a celebration. The other graduating soldiers stood at attention, their ceremony hijacked by our family's dirty laundry, their commanding officers scrambling to manage the unprecedented situation. Marcus broke formation, rushing toward me with desperation in his eyes. "Sarah, please, we can fix this. We can work this out privately. Don't destroy our family like this. Our family." I laughed, the sound bitter and sharp. "Marcus, you helped him steal from me for years. You participated in making me pay fake bills while you lived off money my mother died earning. What family are you talking about?" Ashley appeared at Marcus' side, tears streaming down her face. She'd heard every word, seen every piece of evidence. The man she thought she knew, the honorable soldier from a struggling but proud family, had just been revealed as a fraud and a thief. "Marcus, is it true?" she whispered. "Did you really know about the money?" Marcus couldn't meet her eyes. His silence was answer enough. Ashley backed away from him like he was toxic, her face a mask of disgust and betrayal. "I thought you were different," she said, her voice breaking. "I thought you were honorable." The veterans who had come to honor my mother surrounded me protectively as military police handcuffed Dad. Sergeant Major Walsh kept her arm around my shoulders while other soldiers formed a barrier between me and the chaos erupting in the crowd. "You did the right thing, honey," Walsh murmured. "Elena would be proud of you for fighting for the truth." Dad was shouting as they led him away, his words a mix of denial and desperate rage. "She's destroying this family. She's always been jealous, always been vindictive. I gave her a home, I raised her. On stolen money." I called back, my voice carrying across the field. "You raised me on money my mother earned bleeding in Afghanistan while lying to me about who she really was." The crowd was a mix of shocked whispers and people frantically recording everything on their phones. Some families were ushering their children away from the drama, while others leaned in closer, unable to look away from the spectacular public destruction of what they'd thought was a respectable military family. Jamie Chen pushed through the crowd with her photographer, her journalist instincts in overdrive. "Serafina, can you tell us how you discovered the fraud? How long has this been going on?" I found myself surrounded by microphones and cameras as news spread beyond the ceremony. Local TV stations were already dispatching crews, alerted by social media posts showing military police arresting a veteran's widower for benefits fraud at his son's graduation. "My mother was a war hero," I said clearly, looking directly into the cameras. "She earned a Purple Heart saving lives in Afghanistan. She died believing her sacrifice would provide for her children's education and future. Instead, my father stole her legacy and my inheritance while making me pay fictitious medical bills and telling me I was a disappointment for not being able to afford college." Colonel Torres managed to restore enough order to complete the graduation ceremony, but the celebration was effectively over. The other military families were deeply uncomfortable, unsure how to process what they'd witnessed. This was supposed to be a day of honor and pride, not public scandal and criminal charges. Marcus was pulled aside by his commanding officers for immediate questioning. His military career, which had just begun, was already in jeopardy. Fraud by association, lying by omission, and the spectacle of his family's public disgrace would follow him through every assignment and promotion review. I watched him through the crowd as he spoke with Colonel Torres and other officers. His shoulders were slumped in defeat, his graduation day transformed from triumph to catastrophe. Part of me felt sorry for him. He was young when this started, and Dad was persuasive. But another part of me remembered those emails, his gratitude for my ignorance, his willingness to benefit from my suffering. The veterans who had come to honor my mother invited me to join them for their planned memorial dinner. As we walked toward the parking lot, Sergeant Major Walsh filled me in on what would happen next. "The Veterans Affairs fraud investigation will be thorough," she explained. "They'll audit every penny your father received and calculate exactly what was stolen from you. Full restitution is likely, plus criminal penalties." "And Marcus?" I asked. Walsh's expression darkened. His commanding officers will determine if he violated military code of conduct. Integrity violations are taken very seriously in the armed forces. Best case scenario, he gets a reprimand and extra duty. Worst case, she didn't finish. But I understood. As news vans arrived and reporters set up for live broadcasts, I realized my story was about to become much bigger than a family drama. Veterans benefits fraud was a hot-button political issue, and my case had all the elements that would make it go viral. A war hero, betrayed by her own family, stolen valor, fake medical bills, and a dramatic public revelation. My phone started buzzing with friend requests and messages from people who'd seen the videos already circulating online. Veterans benefits fraud was trending on social media within hours, with thousands of people sharing their own stories of military families being victimized by fraud and bureaucracy. But the most meaningful message came from an unexpected source, Ashley. Her text read, "I had no idea. Marcus lied to me about everything, just like he lied to everyone else. You were brave to speak up. Your mother would be proud." That evening, instead of attending Marcus' graduation party that would never happen, I sat with 8 combat veterans in a small restaurant downtown, listening to stories about my mother that no one had ever told me. They shared memories of her courage, her humor, her devotion to her fellow soldiers, and her constant talk about her children back home. "She carried your artwork with her," one veteran told me. "She had this little sketch you'd made of a butterfly, and she'd show it to everyone. Said it reminded her that beautiful things could still exist even in ugly places." I cried then, finally grieving not just for the mother I'd lost, but for the relationship I'd been denied by Dad's lies. These strangers knew my mother better than I ever had, because they'd known the real Elena Vasquez, the hero, the healer, the woman who'd sacrificed everything for others. As we raised our glasses to toast my mother's memory, I felt something I'd never experienced before. The warmth of chosen family, people who honored truth over comfort, courage over convenience. The real Elena Vasquez was finally getting the recognition she deserved. And her daughter was finally free. 6 months after that devastating graduation day, my life looked completely different. The FBI's investigation into Dad's veterans benefits fraud resulted in federal charges, restitution orders, and a prison sentence that would keep him away for the next 3 years. The stolen benefits, plus interest and penalties, came to over $400,000, money that was finally returned to me. But the real transformation wasn't financial, it was personal. I used part of the restored funds to enroll in the art therapy graduate program I'd always dreamed of attending. My mother's GI Bill benefits, which Dad had claimed for himself years ago, were reinstated and transferred to me. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't struggling to survive. I was thriving. The media attention around my story led to unexpected opportunities. Several veterans advocacy organizations reached out, asking me to speak about benefits, fraud, and the importance of protecting military families from financial abuse. I became an accidental activist, helping other families navigate the complex bureaucracy of veterans services. Marcus' story ended differently than I'd expected. His military career survived, barely, thanks to character witnesses who testified that he'd been manipulated by Dad from a young age. He received a formal reprimand and was required to complete ethics training, but he kept his rank and position. More importantly, he finally understood what our mother's service really meant. He wrote me a letter 6 weeks after the graduation disaster, a real letter on paper, delivered to my new apartment. In it, he detailed his journey from denial through anger to acceptance and shame. He'd started therapy to understand how he'd justified participating in Dad's lies for so long. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," he wrote. "But I need you to know that I've donated every penny I received from Dad to the children's fund that Mom contributed to during her deployment. I can't undo what I did, but I can stop benefiting from it." The letter included copies of donation receipts totaling over $60,000, every graduation gift, every family contribution to his education, every dollar he could trace back to the stolen benefits. It wasn't enough to repair our relationship immediately, but it was a start. Ashley and Marcus broke up, as expected, but she remained in my life as a surprising ally and friend. She'd felt so betrayed by his deception that she became an advocate for military family transparency, using her background in social work to help other families navigate trauma and betrayal. Trust isn't just broken by the big lies, she told me over coffee one afternoon. It's broken by all the little choices to stay silent when you know something's wrong. The veterans who'd supported me that day became an extended family I'd never expected. Sergeant Major Walsh invited me to join their unit's annual memorial events, and through them, I connected with a nationwide network of military families who understood loss, sacrifice, and resilience. At my mother's memorial service, the real one, held 8 months after the graduation, over 50 veterans attended. They presented me with my mother's previously unclaimed medals and the letters she'd written to Marcus and me. Reading her words, written in a combat zone but full of love and hope for our futures, finally gave me the closure I'd needed for years. My darling Serafina. One letter read, "Your artistic soul sees beauty where others see only struggle. That's not weakness, that's a superpower. Use it to heal the world, including yourself." I framed that letter and hung it in my new art studio, a bright space where I created pieces inspired by my mother's courage and the other military families I'd met through my advocacy work. My art had found its purpose, honoring service, exposing truth, and helping others process trauma through creativity. The legal proceedings weren't the only source of justice. Dad's public humiliation in our small town was complete and permanent. The veteran community, military families, and even civilian neighbors who'd heard the story turned their backs on him. His reputation as a military family patriarch became a joke, a cautionary tale about stolen valor and family betrayal. But perhaps the most satisfying justice was how irrelevant he became to my life. I'd spent years seeking his approval, trying to prove my worth to someone who had never valued me authentically. Now I understood that his opinion had always been worthless because it was based on lies and theft. My new chosen family, the veterans, military advocates, fellow art therapy students, and even Ashley, showed me what real relationships looked like. Relationships based on honesty, mutual support, and genuine care rather than manipulation and exploitation. A year after the graduation, I received an invitation that completed my transformation. The military base where Marcus graduated wanted me to speak at their annual Gold Star Families event. They wanted me to share my mother's story and my own journey from victim to advocate. Standing on that stage, addressing an audience of military families, I felt my mother's presence stronger than ever. I wasn't the disappointment daughter hiding in the shadows anymore. I was Elena Vasquez's daughter, carrying forward her legacy of courage and service in my own way. Military families make incredible sacrifices, I told the audience, and they deserve to have those sacrifices honored honestly. When we allow fraud, lies, or stolen valor to go unchallenged, we diminish every real sacrifice that's been made. After my speech, a young military wife approached me with tears in her eyes. Her husband had been killed in action, and she was struggling with benefits bureaucracy while raising 2 small children alone. Through my advocacy network, we connected her with resources and support that helped her navigate the system and secure her family's future. That's when I truly understood what justice looked like. It wasn't just about punishing Dad or exposing Marcus' complicity. It was about using my experience to prevent other families from suffering the same betrayal. It was about honoring my mother's sacrifice by protecting other military families from financial abuse. Today, I run a nonprofit organization that provides free legal and financial advocacy for military families dealing with benefits fraud. We've helped dozens of families recover stolen funds and hold perpetrators accountable. My art therapy practice specializes in helping military family members process trauma, betrayal, and loss. Sometimes people ask me if I regret destroying my family so publicly, if I wish I'd handled things quietly through lawyers and private confrontation. The answer is always no. Dad and Marcus had counted on my silence, on family loyalty overriding justice, on my fear of causing a scene. But some truths are too important to whisper. Some crimes are too serious for private resolution. And some people only understand consequences when they're public and permanent. My mother died believing her sacrifice would provide for her children's future. Thanks to the truth finally coming out, it has, just not in the way anyone expected. So here's my question for you. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what's right? Have you seen situations where people stayed silent about wrongdoing to keep the peace? Drop a comment and share your thoughts. I read every single one, and your stories help other people feel less alone in difficult situations. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about justice, family drama, and finding strength in impossible situations. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear that speaking truth to power is always worth it, even when it's scary. Thank you for listening to my story and for supporting military families who deserve better than lies and stolen valor. Remember, your voice matters, your truth matters, and sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the one you're born into. Until next time, keep fighting for what's right, even when it costs everything.